Hey, everybody. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the Just in Time Cafe. I am Elizabeth Swan, co-founder of the Just in Time Cafe. I'll be your moderator today. And if you've never been to the cafe, you are in for a massive treat. I'm very excited about today's webinar, Walking Backwards. Does your leader standard work support your goals? We have with us today our guest host, Chad Bareither, owner and principal consultant of Bareither Group Consulting. Welcome, Chad.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Chad helps businesses integrate continuous improvement with daily management of their operations to improve success of achieving strategic goals. This is done through synthesizing 18 years of operational excellence experience into a simple, tailorable framework that follows a clear process. That framework is the subject of his new book, Improve Less, the Focus and Align Framework for Sustainable Continuous Improvement. So also kudos on your new book, Chad. That is also very exciting. Okay, some housekeeping items. You guys can ask questions anytime, no matter whether Chad has asked you to put something in there or not. Go ahead and put that in the chat area. There's also a question area. We'll be using the chat area throughout the session. If I see a question in the Q&A section, I'll go root it out, but just so you know. This session is recorded and it will be up on our website by Monday. All of our webinars exist on our website, so you can go see our entire library there anytime you want and just search on topics if you don't see exactly what you were looking for. So our first activity, which you are already enjoying, is we usually have people registered from all over the world, and we'd love to know where you are right now. So if you haven't already, just put in the chat where you're joining us from today. And let me go look. I already saw a bunch of great stuff. We've got folks from here. We're already international on account of Hugh from Burnaby, British Columbia. And then we've got Trevor in Vermont. We've got, let's see, Jose in Phoenix. We've got Rob in tropical Cleveland. I had no idea. I'm happy to hear that. We got Gina. Welcome, Gina, Southern Cal. And Cassie, Cedar Rapids. Go, Cassie. Lauren in Portland. Jen, Santa Barbara. We've got Dan in the Bay Area. Wow. Marco in Guatemala. Check it out, Chad. We are full on. We got Canada. Yeah, Canada in the north. We got Guatemala down south. Jennifer in Portland. Awesome. Great to see you, Jen. Dan, LA. Esther in Kent, Washington. Chad in Wichita. We've got Lance, Michigan. Kim, welcome, Kim.
Lance,
Huh?
I know that because I'm a Michigan Tech grad, so thanks for tuning in from the Upper Peninsula.
Lance, I am formally corrected. I got folks, family in Michigan, just not in Lance. Racine, Wisconsin, Russell. Waterford, Michelle, Jennifer, LA, Brian, North Carolina, Kevin in Woodbury, Minnesota, Christina, San Diego, and Stephen Thompson. Good to see you from Elma, Washington. All right, man, this is an awesome lineup. I am psyched. Let me tell you a little bit about what's to come before we dive in with Chad. First off, next month, we're going to have Katie Bockwald and Justin Kenny, who are both Chief Performance Officer and Performance Improvement Advisor at the state of Vermont. And she gave a presentation at a conference I was at, kind of alternative to the belt culture that, doing the accreditation programs with yellow belt, green belt. And she's saying, they might not meet individual learning preferences or schedules. So she invested in some technology and a different program to get broader organizational participation and to keep people engaged post-training. I know if anyone's experienced the kind of one and done frustration with getting people trained up. So we're going to hear how they're applying the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition plus a few other pieces. So I'm going to put that link into chat. Let me see. So you guys can register for that if you'd like to check it out. And then lastly, I'm just going to tell you, if you haven't already checked out our latest podcast with Rich Sheridan. I was just chatting about Rich with Chad, who's also had the pleasure of meeting Rich a few times. Rich is just a wonderful storyteller, and clearly his books, Chief Joy Officer and Joy Incorporated, he's got a workplace that achieves both incredible, what I call lean incognito, and does it with joy. And so listening to Rich and seeing what goes into that is a huge education. And it's really nice to interview him again post COVID, because we toured Menlo and got to know Rich before, and just to see how they came through with that. So check that out too. Let me just put that link into the chat for you if you have not heard that one. Highly recommend it. He even gave us a little mini tour of Menlo, when they're new digs. Okay, with that, I am extremely psyched to hand this over to Chad, because I'm psyched to see what how walking backwards is gonna help us out. Go Chad.
Yeah, thanks. No, great. And Rich Sheridan's amazing. I'm also based in Michigan, so I've got a chance to meet him. So thanks, Kim and Michelle, also representing Michigan here. I'm based just outside of Kalamazoo, Michigan. So have a lot of roots here in Michigan, starting from my time at Michigan Tech. So great to have some locals on as well. Today, we want to talk a lot about sustainment. So achieving and sustaining our improvements, right? So as I'm assuming most of the people on the call, these JITers are continuous improvement, process improvement professionals. Once we've made an improvement, we want to make it stick. And so how do we align what we are trying to sustain back to the improvements that we plan to make? So I say align your leader-centered work to your strategy, or support your goals with what we're doing on a daily basis. And we're going to use this analogy, walking backwards. So can I walk backwards from the activities I'm doing every day back up towards the goals that I want to achieve? So we're going to start off collectively, being an interactive webinar, talk a little bit about how would we collectively define leader standard work. If you've been around continuous improvement long enough, you've heard that term, maybe even deployed that as a tool or a methodology. So we'll talk a little bit about, make sure we all have a level set on what we mean when we say leader standard work. Then we're going to explore this concept of how do we trace any tool's usage? In this case, we'll look at leader standard work. How do we trace the tool or the concept back towards the requirements that it's intended to support? We don't just scattershot, throw tools at problems and pray for improvement. It was put in place for a reason. So are we aligned if we can walk backwards across that line? And then the last is discuss, so how would you deploy this? Or how would you, if you're in an organization that has leader standard work, maybe you have some insights from today and you want to plan redeployment of leader standard work as a solution to sustain your improvements. But we're going to start off here just talking about why, Chad, why do you think sustainment is such a problem? So we should have a poll going into the chat. And the first poll that's going into the there it is, thank you, is saying, so we do improvement projects, and this was a research study done by Harvard Business Review a few years ago. So what percentage of lean projects would you say actually deliver any improvement, right? I know maybe that's blasphemy. Lean doesn't deliver an improvement, but in surveying over 400 lean projects, lean implementations, they were looking at and saying well, what percentage of those actually returned a measurable improvement in performance? So I'm not sure once the vote comes in where we're able to see the results. I want to see what the participants are saying. Yeah, I can't hear you, Elizabeth.
I just ended it, and now I'm going to share results.
Fantastic. All right. Well, so no one said 100%, so that's good. We're pretty close though. It's actually that second number that we had 75. So maybe we have some pessimists here in the crowd, but the number was 75. So about 75% of projects actually return some benefit, right? So we know we're not going to bat 1,000, and that's okay. Sorry for the sports analogy. We're not going to be 100% successful. But of those projects that retained, so now I guess another poll coming up, if we start back from that 100% of projects, what percentage of those actually sustain improvements beyond 2 years? So you should have something. Now, I didn't even leave 100% as a target here because we know we're starting below that. But now we're saying we put a process improvement in place. We've identified a problem. We've worked with the team to define it. We've driven it to root cause, put a countermeasure or a solution in place, celebrated with the team. And now 52%. Okay, we're 20%. Yeah, I mean, we're close there. We're narrowing in on the one. Someone did say 0%. That's a little disheartening, but some of them do sustain, right? But it's less than half, right? It's about 40%. So the people who are saying 40%, that's about right. It's like 38, according to this HBR study. But this looks like a problem to me, right? So as lean practitioners, as continuous improvement practitioners, this feels like a problem I'm interested in solving, which is a big impetus for me trying to define my approach with clients up front and saying, like, we're going to begin with the end in mind, that sustainment of these process improvements is important. So rather than looking things at tools, it's linked back to what we're trying to accomplish. So that's the gap we're trying to close. Anytime we make a process improvement, inherently we're making some change to the process. When we have a change, the most critical resource for sustaining that change, sustaining that improvement, according to ProSci, and so this is based on change management best practices, is the leader. If we want to go down that list afterwards, then there's the change manager and the project team and the project lead, et cetera. But people look to their leader, their direct line leader, first in supporting and sustaining that change in the long run. Their behaviors, what they focus on a regular basis, becomes important to sustaining that improvement, that change in the long run. So if we know that, it's inherent that the leader needs to be involved in that. And that's leading us into the topic of today's discussion. If leader standard work should be something that is helping us sustain performance, sustain improvement. So we should have another poll coming up, which is just going to look at percentages. I'm just curious of the attendees. We've got, looks like 48 on the call right now. Just like, how many of you would say you have leader standard work deployed in your organization today? Say, yep, we have leader standard work. We use that. We've got that figured out. We are using that to sustain performance or sustain improvements. Oh, okay. This is different than the last time I gave it. So this is good. All right. We got some fresh minds to form here. That's fantastic. So most don't, but we do have some. So I might be looking more to those who said yes, but now's your opportunity also to get back into the chat function and talk a little bit about, great. So maybe for those who don't have it deployed, like, what is leader standard work? So if we have it deployed, I'm looking at least to that 30% that says we do have it. Hopefully you understand what it is that you're deploying. So put your thoughts in the chat. When you hear this term, leader standard work, what do we mean? Because it's important if we're going to be advising our leadership, if you are a leader yourself and begin encouraging your team to use this concept to deploy a tool like leader standard work, that we have a common definition of what that is before we decide to apply it. Dan, thanks. A routine of critical functions, availing the leader time to continually improve. Oh, I like that. I like the way that's phrased too. Availing the leader time. Fantastic. Concept that helps drive behaviors to ensure the right things are getting done. Like that's, I love it. The right things. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So what are those right things? A routine that assures processes, people are working well. I love that we threw people in there, Marco. Thank you for that. The procedures or expectations of a leader. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's proceduralized, what we're focusing on, that the leader should be doing on a regular basis. Helps focus on critical items to encourage the right behaviors with accountability. Yep. Documented currently known best practice. Matt, thanks for that. I think we're going to go in standard work. So I want to come back to that, the currently known best practice. That's important in standards, that just like leader standard work, it may evolve, it may change. Accountability, that's fantastic. Commitment to key areas. So here I've seen a lot of words here like what's key, what's value added, what's critical, what is important, right? And this is what we really want to focus on when we talk about leader standard work. Here's what I think is great that I didn't see in the chat. Leader standard work is not a form. It's not a piece of paper that we deploy. True, oftentimes organizations document those activities that we're pointing to in the chat here that are critical and important to achieve and sustain important performance goals, but it's not a piece of paper. You can use, if you Google search, don't do it now, pay attention now, but Google search after the webinar, you can find thousands of formats and templates on leader standard work. The template is not important. What's important is what I'm hearing from the team in the chat now, is that it's a routine that's going to anchor the important activities. So to back up and build ourselves into a common definition, so I love what we've done here. I've prepared a definition as well, but I want to back up and talk about standard work before we talk about leader standard work. And there's a method to that madness, don't worry. So standard work, if we break down the term leader standard work, and first we anchor on standard work, as a lean and continuous improvement practitioners, we should be familiar with this term as well. Standard work is, as we point out here, the current best practice, implying that it can evolve, right? But it anchors our work in making sure we're doing it the safest way possible, achieving the highest quality and the most efficient. And when I teach it, it's in that order, right? We want to make sure that our coworkers, the value creating members of our organization, are safe. They're delivering a high quality service. And then efficiency, we should never sacrifice efficiency for quality or efficiency for safety. Right, so we want to make sure it's a best practice that keeps us safe, delivers high quality, and then we focus on efficiency of that process. To do that, there's 3 elements within standard work, which is the sequence, the WIP, the amount of inventory that's working in process in that, and the pitch or the tact. And so if I put that in more common terms, the process that we follow, the amount of work I'm doing at one time, and the timing to accomplish that. So how long it takes me to perform that particular task. When we define these, back to what's in the chat here as the current best practice, now I have a framework, I have a standard of work that I can train to, and I can also ensure that we are going to deliver. So now I can plan things like quality of delivery, lead time of delivery, cost of delivery, because it is delivered in a common timing, in a common amount, in the same process every time. So not only does it make it easier for frontline to be trained and execute, it also makes it easier for business support functions to plan and support a common standard process. And so standard work applies up and down the organization, but not equivalently. The closer we get to the value creating work, the more standard it should be. And that's logical. That's not that we're micromanaging the front line. The closer we get to direct customer contact, we want to minimize variability there. The level of quality you get in a product shouldn't depend upon whether Elizabeth or Chad made that product, right? That's craft production. That's not what we're looking for in a lean, repeatable organization. So as we get closer to that front line of work, whether it's service, manufacturing, healthcare, we want more standards of care, standards of work, so that we get a consistent experience. Now, as we move up from the front line, it doesn't end there. It progressively diminishes. And that's because as we move away from repetitive, cyclical execution of product delivery and service delivery, we move into more abstract strategic decision-making, where the landscape, the competitive landscape, and the markets are evolving, and there aren't clear rules and formulas that say which decisions we should make. So as the decision-making becomes more strategic, the process for making those decisions may become less standard. Now, that doesn't mean there is no standard work. A standard is where we have any repetitive task with those 3 elements. There's a known process that it follows, there's a known amount of work, and there's a known timing of how long that process should take. And so that is still very applicable to even executives in an organization, that there's a certain amount of their time that should be devoted to following a certain process for a certain amount of work, in a certain timing. And so I submit to you my definition of leader standard work, which is activities and behaviors that confirm key processes, right? That the key process standards are being followed. And importantly, not that we're just following processes, but that the results coming out of that are correct. So the timing and quality that are coming out of that are correct. Beyond that is when I'm executing my standard work. This is back to who mentioned people in here? Someone mentioned people in here. People, Marco mentioned this, so that the people are working well, making sure that we're providing the feedback and coaching to develop the individuals so that they can improve their own process standards and improve their own results. But there's two important things here. As the leader myself, when I am executing leader standard work, I'm looking at a process and I'm measuring the results. And I'm teaching my team to look at your process and measure the results. And so when we look at some of the terms we mentioned in the chat here of what's critical, what's important, it's things that impact results, but which results matter. I've seen leader standard work deployed in an organization. And if we do roll it out more in that form, like here's the form you need leader standard work, an individual leader will choose what they think is important. Those don't always tie up to, say, work cell, business unit, plant level goals necessarily. It may be like, I think this is really important because it's on my calendar. The trick beyond moving beyond just filling out the form and populating out with repetitive tasks is, are those tasks that are linked to what we are trying to accomplish as a team, or is it just something that I think is important to do? Right? Checking email might be important to you to do, but is that a leader standard work activity? I submit no. But talk a little bit more. So I suggested that as a starting point when we're looking at kind of form-based, tool-based deployment of leader standard work. We end up with, I put what I think is important. And so that may even create conflicting priorities between work cells, departments, things like that. How about yourself? Challenges that you have seen. So maybe that 30%, maybe that 70% part of that 70% had leader standard work and it's fizzled out. Like, what are some challenges you have seen in industry of one deploying leader standard work, or we have deployed it, we've convinced leaders it's important, but we have not been able to sustain it? Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it becomes a check the box exercise and it doesn't actually get done, right? So we have this progressing level of leader standard work. At a certain level, we're checking. So I'm sorry that I'm going to stay on that one because it's important, and I'll get to some of the other ones that are coming in. If we have standard work at the front line, manufacturing, service delivery, customer service, part of our leader standard work is confirming those processes are being followed. Are we following our standard work? Well, that chain doesn't stop there. Then at the next level is the manager confirming that the supervisor is doing their leader standard work and progressively checking the processes? If stable, consistent, if we deployed standard work to reduce variation and get consistent results, we should confirm we're continuing to follow that process. It was important that we standardized it. And so then progressively, we use that chain of support and coaching to develop people and sustain the processes. Too many priorities, that's a good one. One and done exercise. I like unsure on goals. Thanks, Rob. Right. So what is the point of this? Why I'm doing this maybe because I was told to do it. So I filled out this template that someone gave me, and now I check my email at 10:15 every day, and it is a check the box exercise. So you're right, Gina, identifying the right activities. So it's interesting that some of the challenges that we're expressing here are tied directly to what we were saying were the most fundamental elements or definitions of leader standard work, that we need the important, the critical elements. And one of the challenges to deploying is figuring out what those are, which is convenient because that's what I'm going to talk about today. Creating a list of things to do, not focused on key processes, right, Jose? So in some cases, what Jose's talking about is I've seen that where I just take everything that's on my calendar and I say I'm going to do it at a certain time. It's like, but that's not the intention behind leader standard work. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the tools. Here we'll explain tracing any tool backwards. And we're going to return to this analogy of walking because it's anchored in how I was trained and developed as a continuous improvement practitioner early on. So one, walking. It's a beautiful fall day here in Southwest Michigan. I don't know how the weather is where you're at, but I'm hoping to get out and take a walk with the dogs because it does all these great things for me, right? And these are anchored in studies, in clinical evidence. Improves your cardiovascular health, right? So it's exercise. It also improves and maintains your joints and bone density. It's a lot of people take walks after dinner. That's fantastic. It's been shown to link to better digestion and weight management. Improves your mental health. So one, getting outside does, but also getting outside, physical activity, fresh air has been shown to improve mental health. So that's fantastic. Walking is good for you. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. There's also been progressive studies in the last several years about walking backwards, is that it has different physical benefits. So I had ACL reconstruction surgery on my knee several years ago. I still have some instability in my right knee. I started following this guy on Instagram, knees over toes guys. So a little bonus for everyone. If you suffer from knee pain, check out knees over toes guy on Instagram. And he talks about walking backwards. So a regimen of walking backwards for 10 minutes several times a week. I admitted to Elizabeth before we started, I'm not as disciplined about that as I should be, but it does help. I feel more stability, less pain in my knee. It improves balance, coordination, and stability, and is shown to burn more calories than walking forward. That's clinical evidence. That's not Chad's evidence there. Mentally, we have better body awareness. I'm not used to using that motion, so I just have better body awareness and balance. It's been shown to sharpen thinking and critical cognitive skills, improves your senses. So it's even shown to improve your ability. It's just when I'm doing something I don't normally do, all of your senses elevate. So it's good. But let's stick on that mental side. I just want to highlight 3 words that I think are relevant to continuous improvement: awareness, thinking, and vision. Having awareness of where problems are, being able to think critically and learn, and having better visibility of the process and our problems. Like, that's walking backwards. So we could, I submit we can apply the same concept to continuous improvement, right? Oh, we got some, I follow him too. Thanks, Lordly. Yeah. So knees over toes guy, he's popular. So for our mental benefits, I want to take this back to continuous improvement. And so continuous improvement, or improvement spelled backwards, Elizabeth said it looks like the name of a new pharmaceutical, but that's improvement backwards. I was coached early in my career that we should walk processes backwards. So when I am taking teams through a process, a Gemba walk, we'll often walk it backwards. So I don't know, you can say in the chat if you've heard the same thing or if you disagree. But walking it backwards, I'm looking for things, potentially sources of problems I saw downstream. So we saw an issue at distribution, and maybe I see how that got messed up at packaging. I see an issue at final assembly. Maybe I see where that's getting missed in fabrication. So walking that background, yeah, and start at the shipping dock. Thank you, Hugh. So walking the process backwards helps us get different thinking, different awareness, different vision of the problems. I also map my value streams backwards, right? So this ties into Dan. I started the customer and we map backwards. So is there things that we're doing that are non-value added from the customer's perspective? So when we look at a value stream, we work backwards from that because that's the demand, right? That's our tack, that's our pull. We can understand inventory movement, information movement by following that value stream backwards. I also coach my teams to review their A3. So regardless of problem-solving methodology you use, to walk that backwards. If I get to my sustaining phase, my control phase, to make the change permanent, and I need to link back and say, well, have you actually shown it got rid of the problem? Which problem? Can I show I understand what the root cause is? Can I show what point in the process I believe that was occurring? Can I show what the measurable impact of that problem was on one of my performance objectives? Right? If I can't follow that logic backwards through my problem solving, I've missed something. But by forcing ourselves to walk backwards, we see where there is potentially a gap in logic. So same thing I say works for standard work. Why do we standardize anything? And this is broader than leader standard work, but we make a standard to a process to give it more, reduce variability on safety, quality, and time. Well, that's because there's some measurement that showed up in our daily management that was a key metric for us that showed we weren't stable in terms of safety, quality, or time. So we needed to standardize it. So we should standardize something that we saw was an issue that lines up with our management requirements, the set of requirements we manage to achieve a particular strategic objective or goal that is in line with our vision. So that may sound like a high expectation for every frontline employee, but as a leader, we need to be saying, I'm standardizing this work. We're going to institute the current best practice because it's going to get us better performance on this key metric, which ties into a critical management requirement, which links back to our goal as a company, as a plant, as an enterprise, and ties back to our vision. Oh, Jennifer, thank you. So a very specific one, the 5 whys and the therefore test. Also, yes, walking the 5 why tree backwards to see if there's the linkage there. So here I'm saying when we look at any standard work, including leader standard work, we should be able to trace that back to, well, what am I trying to confirm we're doing right? It should tie back to a metric I'm trying to improve, which ties to a requirement, to a goal, to our ultimate vision as an organization. Feel free to throw in the chat if you disagree with anything I'm saying. This comes out of my book. So after looking at several different organizations, several different industries that I've partnered with or worked within, I found that a effective business management system, so if you want to call that a lean management system, that's fine. The business management system has 3 components. You have to have a way to develop and deploy strategy. So I say deploy, not just, write it on paper at some weekend golfing boondoggle and put it in a drawer, but to develop and cascade the strategy into the organization so that we have accountability for different facets of that goal. Once we understand that, we know our gaps. So then we need to know, okay, well, what needs to improve to achieve a goal? Something that we can't achieve today must mean that we need better capabilities in one of our processes at least. So then we need a methodology to improve processes. Once we've improved it, then we need a system for daily management in place. And daily management is not just, visual metrics on a whiteboard or a touchscreen TV. It's the system of, so when do we visit that? And when do we confirm the key processes, which is my definition of leader standard work: confirm the key processes, verify the resulting metrics. So these are the 3 components. When I work with organizations, we deploy it through this 5-step process. We begin with why, so defining your mission and vision, and a little bit broader than that, like, why do we want continuous improvement? Is there an industry pressure, a demand shift, something else? Like, why would we think about changing the way that we manage our business? We begin there. That leads us into, so what specifically are we trying to accomplish that we can't accomplish today? Phrased in an objective and a goal. So my definition of objectives and goals is, objectives is words. We want to be category leader in this industry. A goal might be something like market share. So it's the measurable component of the objective statement. So why do we need to change? Why do we exist as an organization? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we get there? So then we use a tool I call the key performance indicator, KPI tree, to cascade down and say, like, well, what affects that goal and who owns those processes? Which goes in the next step of who. So if you own a process and it's not delivering what we need to achieve the goal, that's a gap, right? I have an actual performance and a target performance and they don't match. That's a problem. I need to engage with problem solving. But what we're talking about today is, once I've done all that, we don't dust our hands of the problem and be like, solve that, file the A3 away, order a cake, and go home. We go to the when, which is the daily management to sustain. So who made those improvements? The chain of leadership that was accountable for improving those processes now takes on the accountability for daily management. So daily management to sustain performance actually starts back here by defining, well, why do we want to change in the first place? We're not deploying leader standard work because someone saw it at a conference or they did a site tour of Menlo Innovations and they have leader standard work, so we should have leader standard work. It needs to anchor in something. So I'm going to walk through the next couple slides of a case study that I worked on with a client, walking through these 5 steps. So you can see how these lead to leader standard work. And then we can back up, we can walk backwards from the elements on leader standard work and show how it supports our goal and our vision. So this particular client is a biopharma manufacturer. So I admittedly am not a biologist or a scientist of any kind. So I don't know much about biopharma. I mean, I know enough about it. But it's kind of like, for anyone who doesn't know this process, it's kind of like making beer. And if you don't know a making beer process, it's you put a bunch of stuff together, a bunch of ingredients together, and you let it ferment, and then you separate the good stuff from the bad stuff. But it's really complicated. So, and in this particular manufacturer, this was the challenge. It was a relatively small facility acquired by a much larger organization, leveraged that that sales force. And their projection was over the next 5 years that they were going to they'd produce 2 products at that facility. We're going to be 4x or 5x the demand they were today. So great problem to have, but still a problem of my value stream now needs to be 4 times as productive, right? So that's why we would even consider like, okay, we need to think differently about our business. We can't just work harder. We just can't work 4 times harder, right? And so then we developed that into a goal. So we looked at their performance, and there was a lot of flexibility in the schedule, technical troubleshooting that was normal for how they were operating. But they stated the objective. The leadership team came together and say, all right, to achieve that, we need improved flow and schedule adherence. So when we have a production plan, an annual production plan, we need to adhere to the schedule. We don't have room for slip anymore. And so what that meant is on-time delivery of every batch. Now, I don't know what industry everyone in on the call is in, but less than a week, you might be like, a week schedule slip, that's massive. This would enable them to hit a production plan that would support a 4x increase in production. So we start out with the why. We have this huge demand change shift in our business. We state the what we're trying to accomplish, improve flow and schedule adherence. We're going to measure that in no schedule delay greater than a week. And then we had to break that down into okay, so how do we get there? This is a tool, not the full topic of this conversation, so I'm not going to go into it here. It's called a key performance indicator, KPI tree, where we start off with the goal here of on-time delivery, and we break it down to, well, what do we need to get there? Well, we need a schedule, we need people, we need equipment, and we need materials. That feels right. If I'm going to run production, I need to know when to produce. I need people to do it. I need equipment available, and I need parts. That's pretty straightforward. If I zoom in on one of those, say schedule, working with this organization, we said, well, what do you need to get an accurate schedule? Well, we need a production forecast. We need our processes to be available. We need good communication between the individual support functions. We need adherence to our schedule, and we need a release process. Being a pharmaceutical, it's essentially QA is quality assurance is the final police there that has to release the batch and say, we've met all of our internal requirements, which have been approved by the FDA. So this batch is good for release. So we need to do all those things, schedule the production, the process, the communication, the adherence, and the release of the product. And then some of the items that are highlighted is what I'm going to use just for the rest of the case study to say, we might look at something like DPS over here is a detailed production schedule. So that's not just what we're producing, but specifically what process is running today. Bill of materials. This particular instance had some inaccuracies in that, and PFEP is plan for every part. I'm sorry for all the acronyms on this one. So bill of material accuracy, plan for every part. So do we know how much of which part is consumed and what the storage requirements are, et cetera? You could do an entire webinar on plan for every part, I think, Elizabeth. Adherence, what's the escalation and problem solving process? And then in release is deviation. So if there's anyone who works in medical device or pharmaceuticals, they probably heard that word. They probably shuddered a little bit, right? It's no fun. It's anytime we've deviated from our standard process and our standard recipe, we need to do a bunch of paperwork that shows that product is still okay. But all that needs to happen or else we can't sell product. So we take the, I think Russell is probably familiar with deviations. He didn't like that. Then we cascade them. So first we work with the management team. So this isn't Chad coming in and saying, this is how you're supposed to run pharmaceuticals. We say, tell us what you need to deliver on time. They build that out. Then they say, great. What processes do you run to get that requirement? Fantastic. How do you measure that that process is working appropriately? And then we go through, great, so who owns which metrics? So we use the format of RACI, responsibility, accountability, consulted, informed, to assign those metrics to individuals. And they show up on there, whatever their daily tracking mechanism is. Maybe you're familiar with safety, quality, delivery, cost, and morale is like pillar metrics. We don't say you have to have something in every category. It's just, okay, if you own bill of material accuracy, if you own deviations, you need to be monitoring the performance of that on your daily performance board. And that's easy to say. So who owns it? So you own it, it goes on your board. And then when are we going to follow up? So we aligned our daily schedule of tiered meetings. We standardized the format that this was going to be reported in for those teams. And then guess what? We finally get to leader standard work. This is why I say you can't just take the form and deploy it in the organization. Now leader standard work, and I have this sanitized to benefit the client, but the elements that are under here are tied back to say, well, I should be checking these items on the performance board every day. I should be going to see this process every day, once a week, whatever it is, to ensure that we're following our standards. So back to my definition, are we following our process standards? And are we getting the resulting metric that we expected? That's the leader's job. And that is leader standard work. If we spent this much time and effort to understand the business, how to deliver a strategic goal, then when we have clear ownership of those processes and metrics, that's the leader's responsibility. That becomes their standard work to confirm those processes on a regular basis before it spins out of control. And in this case, we miss delivery of a batch. So for this one, walking backwards from leader standard work is the items that are checked. I want to go back up and use some of the participants' language here, right? The critical items, the regular activities that ensure performance, the key tasks, the value-added behaviors are defined for us because they're on my performance board. So I look at those metrics and the supporting or the enabling process. That is what goes into my leader standard work. On some cadence, I need to be putting my finger on the pulse of that process and looking at the outcomes to make sure we are going to be stable to achieve that particular goal. And when we're not, that's when problem solving would come in for coaching. But I have my leader standard work, which is traced back to what I own from a performance management standpoint, which is tied back to what we collectively as a leadership team defined as the requirements to enable this key performance indicator, this KPI, which is tied back to what we set as a strategic goal, which is tied back to our strategic purpose, our vision, why we need to change the way or improve some of our processes. When I can link all of these back, I have a much stronger story to tell to convince Elizabeth now of like, you need leader standard work. And she'll say, why? And I say, because these are processes that you own, that we have defined are key to enabling the output that's going to ensure achievement of our goal. So when we're able to walk backwards from the things I have on my leader standard work back up to our top level goal and vision, we've done a good job. And now it is not a, what did we say earlier? Not a check the box exercise. This becomes my standard work to ensure that the organization gets to where we're going. Looking at those 5 steps again, this is an outline of the workshops that I conduct with my clients. We begin with that exercise of mission, vision, and values. If they have one established, we revisit it so that everyone is putting on the same glasses, the same lenses when we look at the business. Then we do a SWOT analysis, not like broad on the industry. So specifically for our business, specifically for this vision that we're trying to achieve. So if we think about like 4x production capacity, like What do we have internally that's helping us as a strength? What do we have internally that's hurting us as a weakness? What's an external force that is beneficial for us? That's an opportunity. What's an external force that is negative for us? That's a threat. And then we boil that down to say, okay, objectively, what are we trying to accomplish? So we said schedule adherence in this case. We define schedule adherence and we measure it as a goal, no more than 1 week schedule slip. We build out the KPI tree where any of the metrics or processes are red. So a metric might be red, meaning it's not hitting target. A process might be red, meaning it just doesn't exist. It's not standardized. In some cases, we may have a process control that's not effective. Great. We go through problem solving. That gets assigned through that RACI process to whoever owns it. And then we monitor our improvement strategies through daily management and process confirmation. So leader standard work is those two things: daily management of results and process confirmation. So we're sustaining here through leader standard work what we intended to improve up here. So there is this direct link back to goals, back to vision. And so now I can challenge you all to look at your organizations. And as we think about deployment, as we think about maybe redeployment of, are the items that are on the leader standard work form, right, the template that you have released to the floor, confirming the critical key processes that are going to get us the results that we want? Are they looking at the right metrics that are linked through a logical structure back to our strategic goals? If not, it might be a good opportunity to revisit some of those. So that's how we can walk backwards, right? And improve our knee strength, as well as our awareness, tighten up our link between tool and goals or achievement. I go into more detail in the book that was released just in October. So it's available now on Amazon. The title is Improve Less, Focus and Align Framework for Sustainable Continuous Improvement. Would love you to check it out. Would love to hear your feedback on any of that. Elizabeth, we didn't talk about this before. Maybe we'll get a list of attendees and we'll randomize and we'll pick one. I'll send them a book for free. So
That's great. I'll happily aid and abet
fantastic.
The lucky random winner.
And then I'd love to hear back from you all. So that's how I walk backwards from leader standard work to strategic goal and ultimately vision. Just feedback from you have. What did you like about this approach, this view, this different angle on leader standard work? Anything you learned? Something we can improve. That could be something I could improve in the delivery. We can improve for Just-in-Time Cafe. You can improve in your organization. So any additional questions, feedback in this like, learn, or improve format from any of you? Start with the end in mind. Thanks, Kim. Love that. You know, while we're on that topic and other people are throwing it in, the sustainment, the leader standard work takes effort, right? And so another area, and part of, the implication in the title, Improve Less, of my book, is that if we try to change too much, remember, that's going to end up on someone's leader standard work to confirm that process, if not indefinitely, at least for a time till it becomes stable. So if we don't start with that end in mind, that it's going to take leadership effort to sustain a change, this is a major reason, back to our first slide. So why do some lean implementations, some lean solutions not make it past the 2-year mark? Because we don't have the appropriate resource commitment from leadership to sustain that. So as personnel change, as equipment change, as you have product variations or new technologies introduced, like, what is the common foundation to ensure that process is still performing? And that's anchored in your leader standard work. We have some people, they enjoyed the polls and statistics. Start with the end in mind. Love that. Walking backwards should resonate with leaders and the front line. Fantastic. Link daily management to strategy. Yeah. And hopefully, Jose, that also means there's just less on your leader standard work. The goal isn't to fill up your day, right? To structure every minute of your day. It's to ensure every day I'm doing the important things I should be. Cool. Oh, that's important. Yeah, Jennifer, I have leaders who think everyone else does CI, and that's fine if everyone else does it. But then ultimately, the leader, someone in leadership, has to be, take the ownership to sustain it. So fantastic. Yeah, like history, if you don't know what's been done, you're likely to be doomed to repeat it. If we don't know why something was changed or what we're trying to accomplish, we may not get there. Fantastic. All right. If you want to know more, I'll have contact information, I'm sure, in the going out to this panel. I'm sorry, the participant list. When the show posts next week, Elizabeth, I'm sure you'll have links to my information. If you have follow-up questions, no problem there. Yes, Hugh, there is a good parallel with Toyota Kata, right? Of cascading the challenges. Fantastic analogy right there as well.
Yeah, there's a question up there. I don't know if you saw. Michelle's asking, how do you help organizations that are constantly in firefighting mode to slow down enough to learn about leader standard work and implement it?
So we'd have to pick one problem to solve first and prove to them it works. Now, and that sounds easy to do, right? I'm actually working with an organization right now that's in that situation. And they're going through and they're saying, well, we need to revisit our standard work, right? Because they have standard work deployed. They don't use it to train. Leadership doesn't audit to it, right? Process confirmed to it. So it's like, great, you did a lot of work to release it as a floor, and now it's all worthless. So we're actually going back and we're going to start small. So which area are we struggling the most in? Rather than say, I'm just not a big fan of like plant-wide or company-wide deployments. So like I would start small. It could be a production cell. It could be one leader. It could be one goal, right? So that could be plant-wide. But rather than do like everything, continuous improvement implies it's going to be a journey. So we shouldn't believe we can get there with one step function.
Yeah, that's good. That's helpful. Do you see Marco's question?
Is leader standard work one of the first things to improve when transformation is taking place in your facility? Well, I think it's an important element. It's probably not one of the first things to improve. Because I would argue, like in my process, we don't implement leader standard work till after we've gone through everything and identified the processes that need to change. So I believe we can false start. If you start with leader standard work, we end up with some of the comments up front we said with challenges of like it becomes a check the box exercise. I just take my calendar and schedule it within the day, right? This is when I check email. This is when I do blah, blah, blah. So I don't think leader standard work should be a first thing that we focus on. We don't, hold on, I want to be cautious the way I say this. I'll just say it, then I'll backpedal if I have to. I'll walk backwards if I have to. Is that we don't need leader standard work until we've standardized something. So the leader is confirming the process and the results. If there's not a process to confirm the standard against or results, a defined metric for the process to confirm, like what is the leader doing? So I don't think it would be a first thing to improve. I think you definitely need to be thoughtful about when you deploy leader standard work and make sure I have that traceability back to, okay, so what metric is this supporting? Aligned with what process requirement, aligned with which goal?
That's good. Good question, Marco. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, then I'm going to follow up with Chad on our random book drawing. And I've noted Russell's comment that he is random. So that'll help your chances, Russell. Just pointing that out.
So I want to point out, Hugh put even a little bit more of a finer point on what I was saying, right? So in addressing the leader standard work, so even at an operator level, standard work is a countermeasure to known performance. And I 100% agree with that, right? To say we start with standard work is like, well, what's the problem that standard work is going to solve? Totally agree, Hugh. It's a countermeasure to a known performance issue. So we have a safety, quality, or a timing variation that we can't tolerate that is making it difficult to deliver. So once you have the performance problem, then you standardize, then you have the leaders that are going to confirm the process.
Good one. Thank you. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you all. fabulous engagement, lots of great stuff in here. So it was great to go back and forth. And thank you for coming, Chad, to the cafe. It's been great to have you. I suspect we're gonna have to draw you right back into the cafe in the not too distant future. Yeah, lots of kudos coming through here. Thank you all. Hope to see you next month when we learn about no belts and what that means. Take care, everybody.